Zoom Video is in the spotlight as user growth of its video communication software has exploded amid the pandemic, and so have the stock's price gains this year. Joining me now to discuss the platform's strategic initiatives and what makes it stand out in an increasingly competitive space is Santi Subotovsky. He's general partner at Emergence Capital, Zoom's largest shareholder, as well as a member of Zoom's board. Thanks for joining me today, Santi.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so at IBD, Zoom's been on our radar since its public debut in April of 2019, and especially this year with the share price gains, it's definitely popped back on our radar even more so. But you were an early investor in Zoom back in 2015. So what was it about the company that made you a believer in its early days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we've known the company and the team for years. So we first came across Zoom back in 2012. So it was very early in the life of Zoom. And we started using it in 2013. I'm originally from Argentina, so my accent is real. And I started using it with my friends and family down there. And even in the early days, the product worked and people loved it and they started sharing. And then I started getting a lot more invites from other people in Argentina. So that's what caught our eye, is that it not only allowed us to transact and have a conversation with people, but it allowed us to build relationships. So that's when we reached out to Eric and we started building a relationship with him. I feel that overall, why the product is much better is because Eric did the hard things early on. I mean, he built the entire architecture from the ground up to scale. And what we're seeing today shows how well built the product is, that it not only supports the incredible user growth that we've been seeing, but they also allowed us to think about how to enhance security, safety, privacy, and roll out a lot of different updates without affecting the performance of the users.
Right, that's such a good point. And speaking of scaling up, if we fast forward to today, just an explosion, like I said, of user growth on the platform here. And with that, you touched on this a little bit, users have been concerned about things like security, for example. So from the management perspective, what do you think has been the most challenging aspect for the executive team with dealing with this heightened growth that the platform is experiencing?
Yeah, so we've been seeing this trajectory and people using more and more video conferencing now for years. I mean, it's been a trend that we've been tracking. The company has been experiencing that growth. But in the last few weeks, with everything that's going on, a lot more adoption happened. And a company that was built for enterprise with security and IT teams that were making sure that we had the right password set up and the right protocols for usage, that basically went to almost like a consumer use case where people were expecting Zoom to be their IT department and help them set up passwords, waiting rooms. So the company had to shift its attention to becoming that IT department for a lot of users. And they rolled out new features and even new updates to the platform that put security, safety, and privacy front and center and give users easy control to set up and use all those security features.
Right. And with the increased user growth, there's also increased competition now from the likes of Google, Facebook, Microsoft, these big tech giants. So what do you think makes Zoom stand out from the pack? And how do you balance this attracting of new free users with paid users as well?
The company has always been enterprise focused. We have some of the largest companies in the world using Zoom. And that's why that enterprise DNA, that enterprise focus on doing what's right for our enterprise customers is going to continue being the focus of the company. We also feel that there's a responsibility, and Eric came out and said this, in this, stressful times, the company has a responsibility to help people out. And I experienced that at home. I've been using Zoom professionally for many years. Now I have my kids on Zoom a big part of the day. My wife's also on Zoom working with her nonprofit. So it's expanded in terms of how many people are using it and the different use cases. And it's an incredible responsibility to make sure that we can support that user growth and keep people connected and sane in these crazy times.
Right. And speaking of different use cases, Zoom has the Zoom app marketplace. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how something like that can help create a more sticky experience for users out there?
We experienced something similar early on. We were investors in Salesforce, and then Salesforce launched their app exchange that enabled companies to build on top of the platform. And now there are multiple billion-dollar companies that were built on top of the app exchange. Viva being probably one of the most notable ones, which we were also investors in. What we see is that on Zoom, people can leverage the platform and build better solutions for Zoom's users without Zoom having to be in every specific use case, trying to be everything for everyone. Zoom is focused on building a robust infrastructure that is reliable, secure, safe, and taking into account privacy. And then people can build companies that are targeting different segments. So I'll give you a few examples of companies that we are seeing. So we're seeing companies that are enabling real-time translation on Zoom, so that when you and I are talking, if I switch to Spanish, then we could have real-time translation and you can understand what I'm saying without having to go back to the transcript. We're also seeing companies that are building solutions for small businesses who are running their businesses on Zoom. Think of uh, yoga studios that are now using Zoom. I have my kids attending paint night sessions on Zoom. So now there are companies that are building around that, telemedicine, education. So I believe that in the next few years, we're going to see a number of incredibly successful companies building on top of the robust Zoom infrastructure.
Right. It's very powerful when you can start connecting even more people in even more ways with the power of technology. And looking ahead, analysts expect Zoom's annual earnings growth to hit 23% this year and accelerate to 37% next year. So from a strategic standpoint, how does Zoom plan to keep up this momentum beyond the pandemic, and especially as more employees eventually return to work and life gets a little bit back to normal?
I think that life is going to get back to a new normal. I don't think the normal we're heading to is going to be the same normal that we have pre-pandemic. And I believe that the entire demand curve for video conferencing has shifted completely, because now people have discovered that they can be as productive and in some cases more productive on Zoom. We're hearing from a lot of the companies that we as venture capitalists invest in is that they're revisiting their long-term real estate strategies, because now that they were forced to work remote, they believe that that's something that they want to continue having after we get back to the new normal. So I believe that the new normal is going to have video conferencing more front and center. People have overcome the fear of turning the camera on. Right now, it's like you and I are chatting, and I didn't even think about, oh, should I turn my camera on? What's my background going to look like? Because we have the virtual background. And I can be in my bedroom having a conversation with you with a beautiful background, completely engaged. And that's going to show us, and it's already showing us, that we can do a lot more without having to be face to face in person.
Yeah, well, it'll definitely be interesting to see what exactly that new normal looks like, and when it might happen, and how companies like Zoom are impacted, and again, how we might see even more use cases than we're currently seeing. It's very interesting, but we'll have to leave it there for now. Santi, thanks so much for your time today.